The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hi everyone. Thanks for joining our Scroll Versions 3.0 webinar today. Really glad to have so many of you here from all around the world. I'm David from K15T Software in Stuttgart, Germany, and I'd like to introduce our presenter today. It's Tobias Anstedt. Tobias is co-founder here at K15T, and he's been deeply involved with the development of Scroll Versions as product manager. So he really knows the product inside and out, and he's just the right guy to present it to you all today. We will be answering your questions at the end of the webinar, but you may type them in at any time when they come to mind, so that you don't forget them. And yeah, we'll save our answers for the end. So stick around. And if there are any questions we can get to by the end of the webinar, we're going to let you know that we'll follow up with you directly by email if we run out of time. One last note, we'll be recording the presentation today, and everyone who's a participant will get a link to view it after the fact. Share it with your friends and coworkers, and we hope you get a lot out of it. And with that, take it away, Tobias.
Thanks, David, and welcome to the Scroll Versions free webinar. As we have some people in the webinar which are not yet familiar with Confluence, I will give a short 5-minute introduction into Confluence 5.9 before getting hands on Scroll Versions. So I prepared some video snippets I will use during the presentation. I'm not doing it live because I don't want to miss a fact, and you shouldn't wait for me clicking all that stuff. So just be aware of that. Okay, in the background, we already noticed that we had to log in to the system. And the first page we get displayed is the Confluence Dashboard. The dashboard was new designed for 5.9, so it was completely redesigned. And it has now a closer design which relates more to the space design. The dashboard is the hub of your Confluence site, providing you with access to information and updates that are important to you. You can get to the dashboard from anywhere in Confluence by choosing the site logo at the top left corner in the header. In my case, this is just the Confluence logo. For your company, it could be a totally different logo, but it's always the top left corner. One important part of the dashboard is the My Spaces section, which is located in the sidebar and provides you access to your content, namely Confluence Spaces. And those Confluence Spaces are containers for pages and blog posts with related content. You can set up different levels of access for each of those spaces using its permissions. Now we are going to create a new space. Doing so, you can choose between so-called space blueprints, which are designed to set up a space for a certain use case. But there's also a blank space blueprint to start from the scratch. And that's the one we're using now. So create a space, create, choose the blank space, click on next. We need to enter some space name and a space key, and create it. Each space you create is automatically created with a home page, which is the first page you will see when you navigate to that space. Spaces don't nest. This means you can't have a space within a space. However, pages can be nested to create as many levels of hierarchy as you need. To create a page, you just need to click on the Create button in the Confluence header. If you click on Create, a blank page is created. This is also a new feature in 5.9, because now in 5.9 they also introduced the ... next to the create text, which allows you to choose between different page blueprints which populate the new page with predefined content. So in earlier Confluence versions, the blueprints were directly under the create button. Now we have this fast access to create a blank space, because for some scenarios you always want to create a blank page and not using blueprints. So in this case we're going the long way. So we click on create, the ... to get the blueprints, select the blank page, and get into the Confluence editor. The editor is what you will use to create and edit Confluence pages. You can enter content as you would do in a Word document. The editor allows you to enter or change the title of your page, insert content including text, images, links, and of course format your content using the toolbar. And in this toolbar, you can choose between different headings to structure your content, format text, add links, tables, images, attachments, and macros. If you know Word, you should be familiar with most of the formatting elements. Macros, however, might be an unknown feature to some of you. So macros basically help you to expand the capabilities of Confluence pages, allowing you to add extra functionality or include dynamic content. For example, we can use the warning macro to highlight a specific text as a warning message. So I already selected warning, put in a title, and now I fill in some body warning text. And after clicking on save, I'm redirected to the view, which displays me how this warning looks like. In this page view, we can already see that there are some operations at the top right, like edit to edit a page, favorite to store it as favorite, and the watching. And watching is a very important feature because if you watch a page, you get informed of any changes on a page. And if you watch a whole space, you get kind of a summary of all changes in the space. If I would have configured an email server, there would be also a share button which would allow me to inform other users or point other users directly to my content. Furthermore, I can use inline comments and regular comments to discuss, review the content. And of course, Confluence tracks the history of changes of each page. It's called the page history. This is done by creating a new revision of the page each time it's modified. You can view the changes between different revisions and roll back to a previous revision if you need to. Okay, that's it. A very short introduction, 5 minutes, to some of the concepts of Confluence. Of course, you can use Confluence for a lot of different use cases. In an ideal world, Confluence is your only platform for all content. For example, you can set up separate spaces dedicated to team and project communication, knowledge management, intranet collaboration, websites, and documentation. And when talking about documentation, I mean, you can use it for project and process docs, software specs, manuals and online help, and of course, technical documentation. So the scroll add-ons for Atlassian Confluence empower teams to write, manage, and publish content collaboratively. They were developed to support the documentation use case. So our add-ons provide features for multiple versions and variants, multiple languages, guidance for authors, exports to different target formats, and website publishing. We currently have more than 4,500 active installations of our add-ons, and some of you might be also familiar with the Atlassian documentation, which is itself managed with scroll versions and a scroll viewport. Okay, we already seen some of the basic functionality of Confluence, which allows us to write documentation. However, versions can't be handled for a whole documentation in a good way out of the box. Although we have access to single revisions of a page with the page history, there's no concept of a version. Answering the question, which is the content valid for version 1.0 of my whole documentation, it's very difficult. Kind of an old school solution to this problem is to copy the whole space using the copy space add-on as soon as 1.0 is ready. After copying, start to write content for the 2.0 versions in the space. This approach works as long as you don't decide to create a 1.1 in between. And also, what happens if you improve a paragraph in 1.0? I mean, you want to make sure that this paragraph is also fixed in the 2.0 version space. I could provide more examples why this approach doesn't really work out well, or yeah, kind of sucks. To make it short, this was our motivation for scroll version management, or scroll versions in general. And scroll versions comes with even more features to solve other issues related to planning, authoring, and publishing your documentation. And I will explain many of those features now. So for this demo, we are using some existing content copied from the Scroll PDF exporter documentation. Scroll versions needs to be installed by your administrator into the system, and then needs to be activated on a space level where required. This can be done by a space admin, for example. So thus we need to enable scroll versions for this space first. So we navigate to the space tools, click on scroll add-ons, and we are redirected to an overview page, which will tell us which modules or features are enabled for this space. So the whole UI was basically redesigned in Scroll Versions 3.0. So I guess this is already some new stuff you're seeing now. The more scroll add-ons you have installed, the more features are listed here in the overview page and in the side navigation bar. So let's start to version the space. Therefore, we can either click on Manage in the overview page or into to the versions entry in the sidebar. So in this case, I'm close the Confluence sidebar first because we now have more room to see what happens. So we're now on the versions screen, which allows us to manage versions. And because we not yet created a version, we get a small hint to create our initial version. So to create a version, I just click to the button and get a dialog which will ask me for a preceding version. I could define a color used for visualization. And there's also the mandatory version name. I can insert a description and a release date if I already know it. So for our demo, we are using a 1.0, and we also provide some placeholder description. After saving and creating our first version, we will get some inline help in the top left corner stating that versions is now activated for the space. So before checking out the space, let's create a second version directly, for example 2.0. So we close the inline help, got it, it won't be displayed the next time. Create a version, and in the preceding versions field we select 1.0. This means that all content of 1.0 will be inherited by 2.0 on the fly. This is kind of a fallback. We do not copy any content until we change something. I will try to explain this in more detail as soon as we start working with the versions. So let's save and switch back to the space. We already can see that something has changed. I guess existing customers will already have noticed that we are using the new Confluence default theme. One major feature introduced in 3.0 is theme compatibility. This means we support all themes bundled in Confluence, namely the default and the documentation theme, but also have support for Refined Wiki and the enterprise theme in their latest versions. We also know about projects using it successfully with Theme Builder, and we are currently investigating support for Bricket Theme Press. So let's take the regular user tour to talk about those new UI elements. We already see this inline dialog with an orange border, which indicates an inline help. And in a version picker, authors can select their working version and begin working on versioned content. The next element introduced is the page byline. There you can find all information about the current page. It's kind of a small information panel. This includes page versions and if activated variant or workflow information. So the next one is the scroll versions menu. Sometimes I refer it as the hamburger icon because it looks like that. And it stores all space-related information. For example, you can compare versions or publish directly from this location. And last but not least, the scroll versions dropdown stores the page-related actions. You can use it to compare pages, convert to or reschedule certain versions, and much more. We will see some more details later on. So, yeah, that's it. That's the initial tour of some new UI elements. To demonstrate what it means to work with versions, we are now going to edit an already existing page in version 2.0. We are going to create a new page for a new feature which we will kind of introduce in Scroll PDF 2.0. And we will also delete a page as this content is no longer valid for our documentation in 2.0, like dropping a feature. Okay. So first we switch the working version to 2.0 and expand the page tree. And as I said, we start with editing an existing page. We're going to edit the REST API. And yeah, we will add some content into the excerpt. So the REST API is about having, in this case, a link to automatically start exports. And we just add something like, yeah, you can also trigger it for fun. So save it, and the next step is that we want to add a new feature. So recreate a new blank page and think about a page title for feature. So it's the super duper feature because it's so good. Okay, we insert some lorem ipsum content to get some text generated. That's how it looks in the UI. And last but not least, we delete the index support feature because it wouldn't be longer available in the 2.0 version. So for all Scroll PDF customers listening, this is just for the demo, right? The feature is still available, of course, and we are going to release a 3.4 version very soon. Okay, just to mention. Now, if we have a closer look at the page tree, we can see that the index support page is grayed out. This indicates that this page is not available for these versions. Yeah, because we deleted it. As versions created with scroll versions does affect the whole space, switching to version 1.0 will not just kind of change the content for the single page we're just on. We also see changes in the whole page tree. As the index support page was still available in 1.0, it has its regular color, so it's a regular page. However, the super duper feature page, which was added and introduced in 2.0, is not available. And if we move to the REST API page, we can see in 1.0, we still got the initial content. And switching to version 2.0 again, we should see that, and we see that there's the updated content available. Yeah, because our changes might be in different places of the space, and just switching between the versions all the time would not really help us to identify the changes. We can use the compare versions feature to compare version 1.0 and 2.0. We can then limit or change the view of the results. I always prefer to switch to the list view and use the filters to get information I'm looking for. In this case, I selected to only display pages that have been changed. That's done by selecting hide unchanged pages. I can see that the index support page was removed in 2.0, REST API page was modified, and super duper feature was added. So exactly what we did. So it's a great tool to get an overview and see what were the differences. And of course, it's not just working for versions which directly succeed each other. It would also work to compare a 1.0 with a 4.7 version. Okay, so far we have seen how to create versions and author in those. As I am both administrator and space administrator in the system, I was able to perform all of those steps. If you or your users are interacting with the system, this might be different. Thus, we should also talk about permissions. So, Scroll Versions defines the following roles: doc admins, authors, and reviewers. A doc admin basically acts on behalf of a space admin for the Scroll add-on. So he's allowed to administrate the Scroll add-ons. This means creating versions and variants and executing all of the actions available for those. A doc admin has implicitly the role of an author and a reviewer. An author can create and edit pages in versions. Yeah, basically what we just did before. A reviewer can switch between versions, so he has the version picker, and also comment on the pages. However, he's not allowed to change content. If you enable the simple workflow feature of Scroll Versions, this can be found in the additional settings in the sidebar. He will also be able to review and approve content. There's one implicit role I should also mention, which is not yet on the screen, so the readers. A reader can access the public version, the published version actually. This matches to all users with view access to the space, which are not in the roles above. You can either assign groups or individual users to those roles. In versions 2.x, it was just able to use groups. Now in 3.0, we added the individual users. And if you start from scratch and do not define those roles at all, of course it works. So users with space admin permissions will be considered and act as a doc admin. Users with edit permissions on the space will act as authors, and users with view permissions act as reviewers. And that's also my preferred setup because it's easy. A new feature in Scroll Versions 3.0 is that doc admins can now define restrictions also on a version level. If defined, all authors are still able to view those restricted versions. However, only the users or groups configured in a restriction are able to change content. That's handy, especially if you have larger teams with certain people responsible for a specific version or maybe feature. But let's configure one to see how it works. So we switch back to versions, click the Actions menu, Manage Restrictions, and just insert my admin user and click Save. So we will see that the table was updated. We now see the added restriction for 2.0 apply to admin. And that's it. In Scroll Versions 2x, we had an operation called archive in this action menu. Customers always expected that this will hide the version and freeze it. But it didn't. It was just hiding the version. So in Scroll Versions 3, we renamed this operation to hide. If you combine the hide operation with the edit restrictions, you can now use it to freeze the versions. So for example, to freeze an already released version, apply hide operation and restrict it to a group with no members. Doing so, this version won't be displayed in the UI anymore, and no one will be able to edit this version. Of course, at any point in time, as a doc admin, you will be able to remove the edit restriction or modify it. Besides versioning, another requirement, especially in TechDoc, is variance. As mentioned earlier, Scroll Versions is not just about version management, it's also about variant management. The difference between a version and a variant is difficult to explain in an abstract way, and they are mixed up very easily because, sometimes people say, yeah, version is also just a kind of variant of the content. And that's, yeah, kind of true. So my favorite example to explain the concept is the Amazon Kindle product. I hope everybody knows about it. The Kindle is available in different generations, which basically match to the version principle. So the Kindle is kind of version 1.0. The Kindle Paperwhite is kind of version 2.0. And each of those products can be bought and ordered either with Wi-Fi only or with Wi-Fi plus free 3G uplink to Amazon. These are the variants. So in the documentation, you would use variants to have conditional paragraphs or contents, or a variant-specific page to talk about the small differences between those product variants. So there's no need to duplicate common content. You just focus on the differences. As variants are based on attributes, we need to configure those first. And in our PDF exporter documentation example, a good example would be to differentiate between target audience, which could be namely admins, users, and developers. We can insert the values with a space in between and press enter, so we just generate all three of them. Save it. Another example would be the deployment model with the values server or cloud. So cloud space server, insert those two values and save it. Okay, now we can create our first variant. We switch back to variants and create a cloud and a server variant. So the cloud variant should contain all pages or content which are either not marked especially for server, which means where this attribute is not set at all, so unset, and which are marked for cloud. Save. And for server, we're going to do it in the opposite way. So we will select unset and server. If we would like to create a cloud admin guide variant, we could also extend our definition by additional attribute conditions. Okay, now we're ready to use those variants. Let's switch back to the documentation. Therefore, we just click on the icon at the left and get back. So the UI has slightly changed again and offers us an additional picker in the content management bar. The variant picker allows us to select a variant for which the content should be highlighted. We will see it in detail in the next steps. Variants can be applied both for whole pages, but also on a paragraph level. If we want a certain content inside a page to be just available in a certain variant, we can use the conditional content macro of scroll versions. Therefore, we added a page, and I use the autocomplete feature to insert those blocks, use the conditional content macro. In this case, we select cloud and enter some text which is just specific for our cloud doc. And we do the same for a server paragraph. So as soon as we select server, we could also see that the variants at the bottom change. So currently it's cloud server, now it's just server. So we already know when adding the attributes for which variant those contents will be applied. After saving, we get back to the view, and for authors, the conditional content blocks get highlighted and information about both the attributes and the resulting variant is displayed. Beside conditional content, we could make certain pages just available for a certain variant. Again, I need to define the attributes, this time on a page level. Therefore, I just create a new page, insert some title, in this case a feature which is only available in cloud, and add some dummy content. Switching to the cloud variant in the variant picker, the page is still displayed in its regular way in the page tree. So yeah, it's just highlighted. If we switch to the server variants, we will see that this page is grayed out in the page tree and thus indicates it is not available in this variant. Wow, okay, we worked hard on our docs and PDF exporter is ready to be released. We dropped the feature, we released some new feature, we also have our cloud and server variants, and yeah, we just want to make our doc available to the customers now. So we could either use one of our exporters to export it to Word, PDF, HTML, or other formats, or use the publishing feature, which is part of Scroll Versions, which can be either triggered in the Scroll Add-ons section for the version management, where we also had the hide or the edit restriction feature, or we can do it directly from the UI. So you have three options. You can either publish to the same space, publish to a new space, or publish, or better say, update an existing space with a new revision. Publishing to the same space is usually used in a software as a service model where you have just one version available to customers. In such a scenario, the space could be used both for authoring and presenting content of a single version to customers. However, you will need to define doc admins and author roles. In Scroll Versions 3, we improved the scenario in two ways. First, we increased publishing speed, and second, you can now restrict the editing of the published version. Okay, let's publish. We click on Next and get a screen where we can define some additional options which are applied when we start a publishing process. For example, you can decide if you want to send notifications for the page updates or not at all. We also see that in the footer of this dialog we have two actions, namely publish and preview. The preview action allows you to check what was changed, so it's very similar to the compare versions dialog. In Scroll Versions 2.x, the preview was a mandatory step before the actual publishing. In Scroll Versions 3.0, we made it optional, as a lot of power users gave us the feedback that they know what they do and they would love to skip the step because it takes time. So in this case, we also will use the direct publishing feature to save some time. Depending on the space size, this could of course take a little bit longer. And as soon as the publish process is ready, readers will be able to access the published content as soon as they access the space, so it's public available. That's why we also call it the public master space approach. To get a feeling of how the space looks like for a reader, authors can switch into the reader view. So that's indicated by this orange bar at the top. Okay, and that's also why it's not 100% true, because the readers won't see this orange bar. It's really just an indicator for the author that he's currently navigating in the reader view. Additional, it shows the information to which version and date the published content relates to. We can see that the selected server variant does not show the cloud-specific page in the page tree. So no grayed out pages for readers. And of course, conditional content is also hidden with respect to the selected variant for the readers. Switching to the cloud variant, our cloud-specific feature page is available again in the page tree. Okay, back to the order view by clicking on the arrow, or we could also use the hamburger icon, switch to reader view or authoring view for those actions. We had two other publishing options. So publish to new space allows you to publish any version at any point in time into a new space. For example, if you just released version 1.0, you could publish it to a space called latest. When you release 2.0, you might update this latest space with the content of 2.0 by using publish to existing space feature. If you still have customers who need access to 1.0, you could publish 1.0 at any point in time again into, let's say, a mydoc 1.0 space. By the way, this is also the workflow Atlassian is using themselves for their documentation. Because no readers will need access to your authoring space if you always just use to new and to existing. You can keep it private. That's also the reason why we call it the private master space approach. In this scenario, there is no need to configure the scroll version specific roles explicitly. Furthermore, this approach has some performance benefits as publishing is faster, and also the calculation of the navigation page tree is much faster for the authoring space. I can't really give you an advice which one to choose, as our customers use both approaches frequently or also in combination. However, the private master space approach is my favorite one. Also, the to new and to existing space publishing feature can be used to publish to a remote system if it has the scroll remote publishing endpoint installed. That's very handy when having an internal behind a firewall high security Confluence system and a public one which is available into the web. If you want to manage multiple versions in a space using the private master space approach and also make multiple versions available to end customers without publishing, you could use the new integration with Scroll Viewport, also introduced in Scroll versions 3.0. You can define which versions are accessible through the viewport and which not. Besides saving publishing time and of course also space, you get the Scroll Viewport benefits such as presenting your content in the way and the design you want for your customers. I'm not going to show you the setup of viewports and the scenario right now. I will just show you how it looks like with our Scroll Web Help template, which is already part of the Scroll Viewport bundle. If activated, we can switch to the viewport representation of our content, which is aware of versions and variants. So we see the version picker and the variant picker. And of course, it can be used. So viewport allows you to define your own templates. It allows you to be configured as the default view for the readers. So they do not need to be aware that you use Confluence at all. A good example for this is confluence.atlassian.com. Atlassian is using a viewport for their customers. Their team is still working in the default Confluence look and feel. Furthermore, viewport renders pages, respectively, the content much faster than Confluence can. If you have access to both viewport and Confluence, you can easily switch back using this little jolly icon at the top right corner. Okay, that's it. The highlights of this release are basically the improved UI we have seen. So we completely redesigned the whole administration and also user experience. We have the enhanced theme compatibility, so with the Confluence themes and the third-party themes. We now have the reader view for the authors to get a preview without logging out, taking a regular user to see what happens. So he has a direct kind of preview mode. And we could also restrict edits on those published versions so that no customers who might accidentally got edit permissions by some configuration might edit this content. Furthermore, we introduced version-based editing permissions. We have a faster and simpler publishing. And we have now this kind of modular configuration in the admin UI. And last but not least, we can support the multiple published version scenario in a single space in combination with viewport. And of course, Scroll Versions does offer much more features, for example, context-sensitive help and the simple workflows and a lot of stuff I just wasn't able to show in the demo. So I hope you enjoyed the webinar about Scroll Versions 3. And now it's time for questions. I just need to check out how many questions there already are and answer one by one. Okay, the first one, which was submitted during the demo, was what is the impact of the release date? So if you're familiar with Atlassian Jira, basically it's the same concept. The release date, if you enter it at the beginning, it's just kind of an indicator for you, oh, that's the time I want to release it. And later on, if you release it by kind of publishing the version, you can just adopt it. So it's more like an internal information for you. We don't update this information. It's it's not involved in any release process. So that's also the reason why it's an optional field. Second question, how do you mark a page as belonging to a variant with labels? I hope this question was there before I showed the scenario. So if you have a page, you just go to the versions dropdown where there is the feature add attribute, and then you just tick your attributes. So a similar dialog which we have seen like in the conditional contents. And then you directly see in this dialog what version, what variant is selected. The next question, if we have done upgrades to the include plus macro. So our product features a macro which is called include plus. It extends the existing include macro because it's version aware. So it eases the reuse and introduces a bidirectional relation between the including page and the included page. So in the included page, we can see, oh, I'm reused by those sites, and the sites reusing a block get also like a hover in the authoring view where we can directly see where this content block is from. We don't have any upgrades or updates to the include plus in 3.0. However, for the 2016 roadmap, we are planning to enhance the whole reuse use case. So make it easier to reuse content. It doesn't matter if it's just content, paragraphs, or attachments. So the next question is, can I track if a content is published? Yes and no. So in the reader view, you can see which version has been published and when. So this just applies to the same space publishing. And in the other scenarios, too new or too existing, you don't really know. So currently there's no audit log to track this information. However, the related pages option in a published space will show you where it's from, but not the date. Another question is, does Scroll Versions 3.0 require a certain Confluence release? Yes. So Scroll Versions 3.0 is compatible starting with Confluence 5.3 and is compatible up to the latest 5.9.2 release of Confluence. So you can expect it's always compatible with the latest releases. From time to time, we need to drop support for earlier versions because Atlassian just changes too much in the API, and we can't support kind of multiple different APIs at the same time. So, but currently it's 5.3 to 5.9.2. Our next question. If I don't have viewport, can I publish multiple versions into the same space? Unfortunately, the answer is no. It was, if you're watching our Jira tickets, for example, so we are very transparent and open about our release planning and the issues and improvements we have. You might have seen that we had an improvement related to this one. So we wanted to support the feature of having multiple published versions within a single space. However, when we started developing this feature and speccing it out and having a very deep look from a technical point of view, we were just not able to find a good or an existing migration path for existing customers, and it would have changed the whole way how versions would work. So unfortunately, we had to drop this feature, and that's also why we invested so much time to get it compatible with Scroll Viewport, to being able to provide the feature to some extent, but unfortunately with the combination of two products. So another question is, does Scroll versions scale? Yeah, I just kind of interpret these questions a little bit. So we have a lot of customers using it in smaller environments, and because some technical teams or writing teams are just, yeah, small, maybe 5 people, 10 people involved in the whole documentation. But as I mentioned in the presentation, the idea of our products is, and our philosophy is, that we want to have the whole team involved and everybody can contribute to the documentation. So we have also large customer living exactly this approach, not just Atlassian, also yeah, CA, for example. So where your different departments just contribute, so you have maybe a support team, marketing, engineering team, a lot of teams really contributing to a documentation. That's why it really needs to scale for the whole team, but it also needs to scale for the whole instance, so for multiple products and unlimited sizes of instances. That's also the reason why we are data center compatible. So yes, Scroll versions can be used with smaller and very large teams and instances. So the question to, does it scale? Yes. Okay. Thank you so much for your participation. And to anyone, although David already mentioned, whose question we could not get into this question round, we will follow up with you by email. And for any further questions, please feel free to email us anytime. And of course, I and our whole team, we wish you happy holidays. Bye.